Greetings and welcome back to the show, World War II Books, Where to Start. I'm your host, General Hans von Zeke, to the Reichswehr, and I'm conducting secret pilot training in the Soviet Union, but no one's supposed to find out. Today I'm going to redo one of my earliest videos on the channel that needs a graphical update and, let's say, better optics, better lookability. So we're going to do General Histories of the Third Reich for when you're ready for one of those whoppers of stem to stern history of the rise and fall of that nefarious time period. Spanning only 12 years, 3 months, and about 8 days. But man, there's a whole lot going on in there. And so the scholarship has evolved. 3 or 4 generations of writers have taken a whack at it. And I like most of them. I covered 4 in my original video on this. I'm going to do 3 with a bare mention of the 4th one because I really didn't like that one anyway. So away we go. Alright then, first up, Klaus Fischer's Nazi Germany, A New History from 1995. 578 pages, main body text. Klaus Fischer was born in Munich in 1942 and emigrated to the States in 1959, gaining his PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 1972. Granted that the Third Reich existed only for that 12 years and 3 month span, there was an incredible amount of mayhem to relate in that 12 years as it relates to world history, so attempt to cram all that into a single volume, and a rather brief one at that, is quite a challenge. If you've never read a stem to stern history of the Reich, or ever certain book by a fellow named Shire, it looks too intimidating for you to tackle. I completely understand how that would be. Well, Fischer's got a good compromise here, and does his job rather well, but at a very brisk clip. As long as he dwells on anything as a run-up to the Reich itself. I'm talking about the first 65 pages of the book, and then the foot race begins. We're talking 2 pages on the Battle of Britain, about 10 pages on Stalingrad and Tunis, 9 pages for the Munich crisis, about 5 pages for the Holocaust by bullets in Russia in 1941, so on and so forth, which tells you how difficult this 12-year span is to condense between the front and back covers of just one book and make it coherent. I found to be excellent at what it does, and without any fluff. Not even for a moment to luxuriate over the 20th of July plot and what ifs, and its what ifs. No, this is no nonsense history here. The photo section has a tough job to do, really, conveying in about 10 pages of photos the whole upper echelon of the political bigwigs and the military control apparatus of the Third Reich, along with the rank and file experience of folks on the street, and there's some propaganda posters thrown in there. So strictly well-known and iconic shots from the war, including the rather dramatic one of the Austrian house painter walking down the steps in his flowing cape. I love that one. Photo section simply has to serve a utilitarian purpose here, and then no frills and no luxuries. So it does its job. This is kind of still in print, but you're better off just going straight for a third-party copy used, and there's no audio available for it. I give it 4 to 5 stars, somewhere in between there, for doing what it set out to do very efficiently and with perfect readability. That's Klaus Fischer's Nazi History, Nazi Germany, A New History. All right, then we'll come back with The Third Reich, A New History by Michael Burleigh. This is from 2000, the dreaded Y2K. And this is going to clock in at an impressive 812 pages of main body. It's rather thick. And the printing is kind of tiny. So the wordage here is pretty dense. Born in 1955, he has a PhD in medieval history from Bedford College in England from 1982. But curiously enough, I think all of his writing that I looked up has been focused on the modern world, and primarily the Third Reich. Most recent entry being from 2021 about a book about political assassinations. So at 812 pages, we've got some room to breathe, it would seem, and flesh things out from Fischer's look at the Third Reich, and indeed the pace is slower, and the magnifying glass is tuned up a few notches in intensity. Burleigh focuses minutely down on the racial and racialist aspect of Third Reich as its bedrock and the very air it breathed, an interpretation and viewpoint that has come to the foreground in a new century. As scholarship has deepened and widened about the Third Reich's livers and gears, the very engine that made it tick. And while it's always been obvious, looking back at previous decades of works by what, 3 generations of writers now? It's never assumed primacy in scholars' minds as it has in these past 25 years of the new century. What the Austrian painter was telling us quite openly and clearly from the get-go had been assumed to be just part of the puzzle for first and second generation historians of the Reich, a part of the whole, not the whole itself. Burleigh is going to ride this new wave of thought about what the 12 years of mayhem really was, beating it to death and smashing into your skull, until you may want to take a breather and step aside from this race-oriented viewpoint of every topic he covers in his history. Understood. It can be heavy-handed with the writing at many points, and he's not strictly a third-person, omniscient, neutral narrator, observer, writer. He has many interjections to make and judgments to pronounce and scorn to pour down on the Nazis that flow right through the ink and into your mind. There's no mistaking the tone of his book, not for one instant. He does spare a lot of pages for the July plot and the role of German resistance. Too much in my view. The various plots against Hitler hardly ever amounted to a hill of beans, not merely due to the plotters wanting to stay alive after the deed was done, of course, but also due to their backwards, reactionary longing for a return of the monarchy and the restoration of some golden age mythicized Christian Germany that was outlandishly unrealistic in the position they found themselves occupying. The best options were gifted to the resistance pre-war. Once the war began, their conflicting oaths to Hitler's personality and their sense of loyalty to the mighty idea of their nation, Germany, paralyzed these men until Stauffenberg kind of kicked them in the ass and single-handedly got everything moving again. This chapter may be necessary to give the illusion that the resistance was real and effectual in the Third Reich, but the illusion is just that to me, smoke and mirrors. I've never been a big believer in the German resistance, centered as it was in mid to high ranking German army officers who were reactionary, kind of hiding in the woodwork, trying to pretend they were real hardcore Nazis when what they really hardcore was their nostalgia for the Second Reich and Hindenburg and the World War that they lost. Just that golden age that they thought was perfect, the imperial era that ended in 1914. So as a military historian, he's not concerned with armies moving about here and there, or positions to take, or strategic options. He's all about occupation, economic stripping of occupied regions, and ethnic cleansing. So again, back to the race-oriented stuff. So if you really want some military history of the Third Reich, neither this nor Fisher's book is where it's at, and indeed not even the one behind this. It's really not. All in all, a heavy hitter that doesn't apologize for its deep dive into all things seedy and dirty by the Reich. But it's definitely not a balanced account if you're looking for the sound of the guns, or if you're wanting more high-level diplomatic stuff. This is really just blood and guts from an extermination point of view. It's really about the centrality of race and how it dominated and was the reason to exist for the Third Reich. I give it 5 stars, but I understood it's not quite for everyone this time. So that's Michael Burleigh's The Third Reich, A New History. All right, then the one I'm going to kind of discard here is the Richard Evans trilogy, with some unfortunate and unimaginative titles. Starting with 2003's The Coming of the Reich, then we have The Third Reich in Power and The Third Reich at War. So very utilitarian, plain Jane. Could be a documentary from the 60s. And as far as titles go, not too inspiring. When I picked up the third volume, The Third Reich at War, had one of the iconic photos of an SS guy in a trench on the Eastern Front. And I thought, oh man, this could be good. $5 in a bargain bin at Kroger's. Who the hell knows why it was at Kroger's of all places. But I picked it up without second thought. But I never started, or at that point in time, this was way back, I never started at the ass end of a trilogy. It was always, had to go front to back. I would never have dreamed of just reading the third one by itself. No, it was too OCD for that. So, when I got around to reading the first one, boy was I utterly disappointed. The man's very plotting, and really, the first volume's obsessed with political voting results, and who voted for Hitler and who didn't vote for Hitler, and the organization of the Third Reich, or of the Nazi Party, and the process of him getting into power. No surprise there, but at its severe length, it's quite a drag. It's like dragging a ball and chain behind you down the road for quite a few miles. Nothing exciting there, nothing to hang on to. The second volume was the best of the three, and there's individual sections there I really liked. Leni Riefenstahl's saga and Robert Lai, and a few other aspects of the education system of the Third Reich. I really thought that was good. But then the third volume just completely let me down again. It's a one-star affair because Richard Evans is not a military historian. He's not at all. He cannot write military history to save his life. It's really bad. Really simple stuff that you shouldn't be able to bungle, especially if you're a British historian like the Battle of Britain. He bungles. So I think he's British. Maybe not. I hope he's not American. Actually, I'd rather him be British. But all in all, it's a real letdown. Now that gets critical praise from all his buddies in the academic circle, of course. Everybody blurbs for everybody else. That's the way of life in the academic circles. If you're a popular historian writer on the bookshelves, hey, can you write a blurb for my cover? I'll write one for yours. So you'll get a lot of praise. This is a great blah blah blah. This is a monumental work, blah blah blah, from all the big names, and probably got to go write up the Daily Telegraph and all that good stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's nothing worthwhile really. It's a long slog of a trilogy for probably 2,000 pages or more, and it's just not worthwhile to me. So that's Richard Evans' sad and sorry effort of the Third Reich trilogy. All right, then we'll come back with the Hall of Famer right here. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shirer. This is from 59/60. This thing clocks in at a whopping 1,143 pages, main body. And I looked up my printing on the inset here. This is the 24th printing of this thing. Now, book sales are often hidden, almost always hidden. They don't. The industry is really weird. Whereas the record industry can't stop telling you how many copies a single sold or an album sold, or when it went double, triple, quadruple platinum, or what chart the song is on top of for X number of weeks. The printing publishing industry is really bizarre. They do not want to give away author sales figures. They'll tell you something was on the New York Times bestseller list for X number of weeks, and on rare occasions they'll tell you it's sold X number of copies so far. And this is one of those books. Now, this is a nonfiction historical brick that has sold over 1 million copies. Now, that 1 million copy date is probably back in the 60s or 70s. So by now, it's probably 2, 3, 4 million copies maybe. I don't know. Again, finding current information on number of copies sold, you just can't do it. It's hidden away behind a thick paywall, and you have to be in the publishing industry to kind of access it. It's really bizarre. Maybe if I go find something on the dark web, if I look hard enough, I could find where actual sales figures are recorded. You could access that, but I haven't gone to that length. But just kind of selling this in the publishing industry. Why wouldn't you want to brag about how many copies your author from your stable has sold? That's the whole point of staying in business, where we put out really good books, and we've sold X number of copies. It's just a mystery to me why they do that. It's nonsensical. It's irrational. But I digress. Onto the matter at hand here. Like I said, this is the Hall of Famer right here, from a man who was on the scene until America entered the war. A man who saw Hitler walk right by him at a hotel one day, who was familiar with the faces of the Third Reich and the hierarchy in the early days and all the vicious gossip about them, soaking it all in, because he's right there on the scene, doing interviews, doing magazine articles, doing radio broadcasts. So it feeds the tone of the narrative and this encyclopedic history of those days, and is sometimes remarked upon by today's reading audience as being anti-this or anti-that and homophobic in nature, prejudiced towards today's readership. And that's a really unfortunate interpretation of Shirer's time and place. That's a heavy dose of presentism from people reading it today who are absolutely worried about the wrong thing if they're worried about whether the tone of the book is homophobic. You are missing the picture completely. In his time and place, the way he cast scorn on these guys because he knew them face to face, it's unremarkable. It's absolutely run of the mill. You wouldn't expect anything else. When he's talking about other matters, diplomatic and background, and the intricacies of day-to-day operations of the Third Reich, that tone disappears, and he's a professional historian. When he's talking about something up close and personal, an encounter with a person, or they're known behind the scenes nefarious activities, yeah, it's prejudicial. But again, he casts these guys as gangsters, as the first generation of World War II historians did. They cast the Third Reich as simply a bunch of Chicago-style gangsters who came to unimaginable power completely by accident. And at that early date, there's no other way for writers to really frame it and get their head around what the Third Reich was and the people within it that operated it. And that's the only parallel they had, was to compare it to Chicago gangster land prohibition stuff. So that informs, if we want to use a fancy phrase, that informs Schirer's approach entirely. He's of that time. He's the first guy to put together general history of the Third Reich in 1959. And a lot of critics may have thought it was too early. There wasn't enough information released. There hadn't been enough time separation from the end of the Reich to when he published for it to be somewhat objective and macroscope and vision and approach. But 60 years later, right, this thing's awesome. It has, I don't think it's aged terribly at all. I think it holds up remarkably well. I don't think he really got anything wrong despite the early publication date. Yeah, there's information that came out later, of course, Ultra being the biggie, but also the private correspondence and telegrams between the big three back and forth, and the horse trading they did, and all the tough negotiating they did to get their way with certain territories and populations after the war, and economic concerns, as well as the post-war political makeup of Europe. Yeah, a lot of that would not have been available to him at that time. But I don't think he misses anything by not knowing that for a first-generation writer of this. I think it's just awesome. Now, it's thick. I mean, it's dense. And when I picked this copy up when I was a kid from a St. Vincent de Paul thrift store, and I don't think those things are around anywhere anymore, for like $3. And I was probably 10 or 12 years old when I bought it, and I attempted it in high school. And it's so dense that I got worn out by the time I got to 39. I hadn't even gotten to the war yet. I was like, when does the action start? I can't take it anymore. About 550 pages in, I quit. But in my 20s or 30s, whenever I went back to it, I attempted it again. I got through it much cleaner, much easier. And then the most recent read I did was audio, and that was 60 hours. And if you're going to have a 60-hour audio book, you better have a damn good narrator to carry it. You got to have a pro who's got some real acting talent, and the guy they hired was absolutely fantastic. So if you've got any fears of that for a very long audio book, I would say not at all. It's very, very well done. So this is not strictly military history. The military stuff comes in more than halfway through the book. The course of the war is treated in some summary fashion. I think it's more related to the political situation and the world stage than casualties on the battlefield or lost opportunities, or when should the Germans have invaded Britain or shouldn't they have, or why did they invade Russia. There's a little bit of that, or their military options after Stalingrad. He's not a military writer. He's a diplomatic and current events kind of oriented political writer. So in that sense, again, it's all top down. It's a top level history. There's no man in the street interviews. There's no little anecdotes. Joe was walking down the street one day when a bomb exploded randomly in the building next to him and blew him to bits. None of that. It is strictly top down, high level power brokers and their relationship in the Third Reich and on the world stage. So if you're dying for anecdotes, if you want a more militarily oriented history, of course none of these I've covered today do that, except for the third volume of Evans trilogy, and as I said, that was not worthwhile for the effort at all. So if there's I don't know if there's really any downside. I should mention that this contains one of the best summations of Nazi war crimes I've ever seen. A lot of it's taken from the Nuremberg trials after the war, It's kind of a summation of all the bad stuff they did. And this is early days again, so the nitty gritty isn't known, but in the broad strokes, again, he gets nothing wrong, and it's absolutely searing to read. It's an eye popper. You'll blaze right through it, and it's kind of like the gut punch, the knife in the back right there. Like, man, this is the whole point here of all the setup, 700, 800 pages of setup. Here's the payoff. This is what they were, and it's a stunning effect. It really is. This is Hall of Fame material. If there was a nonfiction writer's Hall of Fame, I'd vote this guy in on the first ballot without a second thought. So that's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shirer. And that's going to do it for today's Third Reich General Histories. And I hope one or two of these has fascinated you to the point where you're going to have to pick it up and run right through it yourselves. Okay, so I am Hans von Siecht, and I have to carry out my clandestine plan for rebuilding German military strength in partnership with the Soviet Union, and that pains me no end because we all know communism is the real enemy. But I got to do what I got to do for the future of Germany. Until next time, happy reading.